What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Dreams to Reality podcast. And today we've got a very, very special guest and somebody I look up to in more ways than one. Andy Buck, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, Cameron. Thank you very much. And he is taller than he looks, by the way.
I'm not.
Sorry.
My website's a lie. Firstly, thank you. It's Friday afternoon. I appreciate your time.
It feels like Friday night, actually, to be fair.
It does, to be fair.
Yeah.
We've got a lovely... Can you explain to everybody, actually, where we are?
Yep, so we're in what we call the Goldfish Bowl in 4 Cam Road in Stratford, East London, which is the home of Leadership Matters, EduStaff, the National College of Education. This is where it all happens from.
As I said, if you was on holiday and somebody didn't know who you are, and they say, hey, Andy, what do you do for a living? How would you explain what you do to anybody?
So I kind of would start by saying I used to be a teacher and a head teacher, but now I work for myself about the thing I've gone right back to being a teacher, which is around leadership. So I write books, I speak, I coach, I train, but the common thread through all of that is just leadership, because it makes such a difference. And I feel like I'm happier and making more of a difference in my work career at 56, more than I ever thought or dreamt would be possible at this stage.
That's incredible. So, as you said, you as a teacher, how long was you a teacher for?
30 years maybe.
So 30 years.
Yeah.
Do you just do leadership in education, or do you do leadership in other areas as well?
Mainly education, but it's branching out because, leadership's leadership. So I do work in education-related businesses, and then more recently I've done work in financial services in the City of London. But mainly in education, because that's where my passion is. Increasingly, of course, that's starting to be more abroad as well as in the UK, because one of the things about the Leadership Matters website is you can use it anywhere, and people are starting to get to know the work. That's
interesting, because for me, obviously, I came across your work because I'm heavily involved in education, and I know I'm probably a different market to say who you'd be talking to, but I was reading your book. I think it was how old is your first book, the blue one?
The first blue one is, it's 5 years old.
5 years. So I reckon it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago I read it.
Yeah.
I think I followed you on Twitter. I also followed you on LinkedIn. And I've just kind of been watching from a distance. And the more I'm involved in schools, and the more kind of programs I run in schools, the more I work with senior leaders, and I understand actually how important leadership is. But not just leadership, in my opinion, to other teachers and to the students, but also teachers leading, students leading, and then also parents leading as well. So parents, especially say with my pupil premium stuff I do, parents is a real challenge. Are you a father?
No, I don't have any children. I mean, I don't know how people who are teachers have children. I'm in awe. Because when I get home, the last thing I want is all of that to deal with, to be honest. I don't know how they do it. It's amazing.
So, with that said, you're heavily invested in the work you do and the stuff you've done in schools. When you first started teaching, did you expect to work up the ranks? Is that a part of who you are, to always kind of give it 100%? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, no, absolutely did. So I think I was a leader before I was a teacher. I always knew I wanted to be a leader when I was at school and when I was at uni. I did leadership things at uni. I was like the hall president. And so I've always loved, and I don't think it's because I'm like power crazy. I just like to have influence, I think, probably. I just like to make a difference, and I love the fun of doing stuff successfully with other people. So it was just a question of, well, what am I going to lead in? What is the area that I'm going to lead in? And I started off thinking that might be in television, actually, ironically, and worked for a film company for a year after leaving uni, and then realised that wasn't what I wanted to do. Okay. And so I went to the Institute of Education, trained to be a geography teacher, and like the rest is history, really. But it was in a film that I decided I wanted to be a teacher. I went to see Out of Africa in 1987. And in that film, I was so in awe of the landscape of Africa and this woman who'd gone to the other side of the world. It just inspired me to be a bit braver about making a decision for myself. So I was one of those teachers who thought one day I want to be a head teacher. I became a head teacher quite young, too young, really.
How old?
32.
Wow.
I know, it was crazy. It was. I mean,
you must have
probably shouldn't have been allowed, Cam, to be fair.
One of the youngest, if not the youngest head teacher in the
I mean,
UK.
there's a few around that early 30s probably. Yeah, it was quite unusual, especially.
I've seen it in primary schools.
Yeah, this was 1,500 kids in Dagenham. It was quite a big gig. And 2 years before that, I'd been a head of geography in Muswell Hill, so it was scary. I used to long for Friday.
So, how was that challenge?
It was tough.
Did you fall into it, or was it something?
It was a bit accidental. I mean, I always knew, as I say, I always knew I wanted to be a head, but like that was maybe 5 or 6 years after I'd started as a deputy head. But the head took early retirement, and I was not planning to apply for the job. Obviously, 2 years, it was crazy. But then a member of staff, in fact, a couple of members of staff came to me and said, "Andy, are you going to apply?" And I thought, well, God, if they think it's even a possibility. I remember one of them said to me, "Andy, why don't you apply in case you're the best there is?" It's not like the ringing endorsement you're looking for in that situation. But anyway, I thought, you know what, I'll stick in, because if I'm the best there is, I'd rather it was me than someone else.
Yeah.
Anyway, rest is history. I was the best candidate. And I mean, I got the school to good, but not solidly good.
So that phone call, what came through?
Yeah.
To say...
Excitement and fear in equal
was
quantity.
Was it like, yes!
Oh my God, yeah, it was exactly that. It was exactly that. And the reality quickly set in that this is, you know...
So let's talk a little bit about leadership. We're going to talk a lot about leadership. So at 32 years old, being a head teacher of a school, of course you are not only leading the students, you're leading the staff. Mm-hmm. I'd imagine you would have a lot of staff who was older than you. Mm-hmm. How do you come into that position of power, can we call it that? Position of power, and lead from the front and make changes and actually be like, oh, what does he know? He's 32.
Yeah.
What is the first step of taking over?
Yeah. So there's a French building company that I, in my second headship, worked with when we were designing and building a school called Bouygues. And their strapline, you know, like businesses all have straplines. Their strapline is, the first thing we build is trust.
Wow.
And I think that's actually what I had to do. I think it's what any leader has to do in any job. You need to get people to trust you, and then they'll come with you. Because, you know, if leadership's three things, it's like having a vision of what you want to create, what Steve Radcliffe calls what you want to get up to.
So you said three things.
Yeah.
Okay.
A vision of where you want to get to.
Yeah.
You need to then, secondly, get other people to buy into that and want to come with you. And then you just have to deliver. And that's about systems, organised processes, you know, because it's no good if it's all just that fancy stuff. You've got to, like, get on and make stuff happen as well. And so I think if people are going to trust you, or if you want to engage them, if you want to get them to come with you, they need to trust you. And they need to trust you. Stephen Covey's work on trust is great. And, you know... So he's written a few books, but probably
I've read the most famous
one, The Speed of Trust. Oh no, he's got one about habits, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Which is great. And then there's one I think he wrote after that called The Speed of Trust. And basically, if I was to get that down to something pithy, which is kind of like one of the phrases I'm using at the moment about leadership, pithy is practical ideas that help you. Okay. It's got to be pithy, otherwise what's the point? You can't do anything. I mean, basically, I was talking about this morning with some fantastic schools in northwest London, is two reasons why someone would trust you, Cam, why the people you work with would trust you. Schools that employ you to go and do amazing stuff with them would trust you. Number one, because they trust your character. And that's about your intent, your honesty, your decency, your transparency, your motivations. That's one reason why people will trust you. But the other reason why people will trust you is because you're good at what you do. You know what you're doing. You know, if someone's going to say, come with me to the North Pole, you're going to think, well, do I trust them to know what they're doing? So it's those two things, really. So going back to, you know, whenever it was, 1980 something, when it was about building trust, that I could be trusted for my motivations and my honesty and my decency and trying to be fair and authentic. And that was a bit easier in a way because I'd been at the school 2 years and they kind of had got to know me. Yeah. The bit that I had to work much harder at was trusting me that I knew what I was doing, because some of the time I didn't feel inside like I did. There was no MPQH, there was no headship training. I had a mentor who was a lovely guy, really lovely guy. He's not with us anymore. He was a head in the same borough. And my mentoring was, we went down the pub once every half term for a nice chat and a few beers. And that was it. So
you was on your own?
I was definitely on my own. I mean, I learnt fast, and I read, you know.
You read, you're on the job, you're learning from experience. You're either going to take the opportunity and you're going to execute, or it could maybe just become one of the biggest learning experiences. You're still going to be learning anyway.
Yeah.
What advice would you give somebody, not just in school, but say even somebody who's starting a football or becoming a captain on the football team, or somebody who's got a promotion in their job ahead of, say, 10 other people who applied for it in the same office?
Yeah.
What type of advice would you give them to become that leader, which they need to be, essentially? What advice would you give? Quite a broad question now, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. But so I think you do need to be up to something. You do need to know what it is you care about, what you're passionate about, because that's infectious. So being really clear about what matters to me as a person, as a leader. I mean, you'll know you're very successful. Why? Because you care about things. I think. No, you do.
Yes,
right?
of course.
From my research into you.
And that's what I also said to you, because obviously I go on my Twitter, I talk to 100,000 young people a year, and I think we're going to have to actually change that now, because it's a lot less.
Right.
But the reason why it is a lot less is because it's easy to go and talk to loads of people, but where is the lasting impact? And it was like, okay, it's good, yeah, step on stage, your ego gets a big boost and stuff, but then you go there for an hour and you leave. And then I wanted to start to provide a lot more kind of value and actually feel like I'm making a difference.
Yeah.
One, that forced me to improve my content, my learning, my education, and also had to improve me as a speaker as well. So now obviously I do a lot less. I do smaller groups, mainly pupil premium, and I work with them, say, 6 times throughout the whole academic year.
I bet you make a lot more difference, though, if you
100%.
added it all up.
Because I work with the parents, I work closely with the teachers, I send out emails to the parents, develop personal relationships with them now. So it's like a big kind of positive circle, because what tends to happen sometimes, if, say, little Johnny... Poor old little Johnny.
Yeah, he's always little Johnny.
Yeah, it's always little Johnny. If little Johnny is constantly bad in school, the parents are getting negative feedback constantly from school. Yeah. So if he finally does something good in my workshop, I can feed something positive back to them, and hopefully it might be able to kind of shape and change a little bit of mindset, I guess.
Well, you've just illustrated, though, one of the things I think you do, going back to your question about what do you do to get people bought in. One, you care about something. Two, you honk positively. So Geese.
What is honk?
Yeah, so honk is one of my sort of informal brands, and the latest book I've written is called Honk. And it's about what geese do. So, we see geese flying in this kind of V-shaped formation.
Because that's all on your,
and that's
on
all
brand,
their kind of, that's all the brand, the
stuff.
geese thing. And it's a powerful metaphor. Whether or not what we say about geese is true, they can fly 71% further if they're in formation because they get uplift from the bird in front. There's all these things about the metaphor that I write about, particularly in the honk book. But one of the things is that when you honk, which is what geese do, they're honking to encourage the bird at the front to keep going.
Oh, okay.
But of course, what we have to remember as humans is that when we honk, we need to remember to honk positively.
Okay.
Which is you saying, if children are just always getting a letter home when they've been in trouble, then they don't think you care about them, actually. They just think you just want to get them into trouble. Whereas when you're able, like you say, to be able to send something home to a parent, I mean, every week when I was ahead, I used to send letters home that the staff would give me the information and my PA and I would send. And I used to say to the staff, I will only send letters home if I've got more positive ones to send than negative ones.
Wow.
And that was like a rule. And I always did.
Did you just make that rule up?
Yeah, just made it up. Yeah, sometimes you just make things up.
Just make things up.
You've never done that.
I mean,
yet.
I've winged it this far. So. Wow. So how long was you ahead in that school?
So I did two schools. The first one, 5 years.
5 years.
And the thing I'm least proud of, well, there's two things really. One was that I had 2 years where the results went up really fast. And I thought, oh, okay, I know how to do this. This geography teacher 2 years later is running a school. And then in the third year, we went right back to where we started.
Wow.
And at that moment, I kind of like nearly thought, jack it in, I can't do it. And I rang my mum.
Did you?
My mum was like a real support for me. She had been a teacher, then she worked like in local authority administration. And I rang my mum and I said, Mum, I don't think I can do this anymore. And my mum knows me obviously like really well, and the mother-son relationship thing. Yeah, she said, "Oh, you might be right, Andy. I'm not going to disagree with you, but don't make the decision now." And I thought that was really clever. So she didn't disagree with me. She didn't like deny me how I was feeling, but she just said, "Don't decide now. Wait until Christmas. There's no rush. Closing dates for jobs and all the rest of it." And by the time I got to Christmas, I was fine again. I'd reinvented myself. I'd pulled myself back. So that was a really early lesson.
Said, Mum, this might not be for me. And she said, you may be right.
Yeah.
But just give it time.
Yeah. It's just such good advice.
Have
Such
you,
a great
have you
response.
used that advice?
I often, because
And
people,
and
when
then
they're emotional,
do you think about your mum when you do
yeah,
that?
all the
Do
time
you?
think about my mother. You know, sometimes it's just about giving people time to digest. You know, resilience, that whole thing about bouncing back. Sometimes people need a bit of time to bounce back. And one of the things that helps them bounce back is that social network.
Yeah.
It's that belief in what they're doing. It's the self-confidence that they have amongst themselves. And I guess that ability to be flexible a bit. I think for me, they're the kind of 4 key things that make us resilient. But the other thing that happened with that first tip that I'm not proud of.
So can you just clarify again? What, the 4 things what make us resilient? What are those?
So this is a model by like some guys called Robertson Cooper.
Okay.
And I love this model. And they have a free, if you Google Robertson Cooper, they have a free diagnostic tool that enables you to find out how much you've got in the tank on each of these 4 things.
Wow.
So I use this a lot in my training. So number 1, do I believe in what I do? Purpose. Because that can get you through when, you know.
So resilience, purpose.
Yeah, resilience, if you've got purpose, you care about what you're doing, you think it matters, you can cope with difficult stuff. The second thing that helps you cope with something where you need to bounce back is that you just believe in yourself, that you've got some self-confidence. So like, yeah, this is hard, but I know I can get through it.
So purpose, self-confidence.
The third thing is access to and knowing when to go to someone who'll give you like social support. So for me, that would be my mum, not my only person, but my mum was a big one. Everyone needs that person or those people. You know, that's why, you know, for heads, I always encourage them to have a coach because it's a lonely job. And to have other people in a network. And it's not always local heads, because sometimes local heads are part of your competition.
Of course.
So it's people that are outside of that.
Can it be quite productive to have a coach outside of the education
Yeah,
sector?
absolutely. I had the guy who was the head of logistics for Sainsbury's as my coach through some business and schools partnership. He used to drive in from Essex past my school in a chauffeur-driven car, and he'd stop, and his chauffeur would sit in the car park, and then he'd come in and do a coaching session with me for an hour, and then he'd get back in his car and he'd drive him home at the end of the day. So, yeah, that's his escort now.
That's his escort now. He's going through. He heard you. He's on his way.
So, yeah, so that's the third thing, access to that kind of social support. And then the last thing, which I think is really important actually, is like you do have to be adaptable. Because like if you just keep getting knocked over and you keep coming back and doing the same thing, there's only so much of that you can take. So it's like it's coming back, but like maybe you just slightly reinvented yourself, or you just got like a different approach to something. That can help you get through.
Because if you're so kind of structured and routine based, it doesn't matter what type of field you're in. I feel to be truly great at something, you must be able to execute outside of your normal schedule and outside of your normal routine.
Yeah, I guess that's
Would you agree
true.
or disagree?
No, I would agree.
So,
I mean,
for
I
example,
think,
just say worst case scenario. You normally say walk the dog in the morning, you go and do this, but all of a sudden you get a phone call. It's a school in Dubai. They want you to fly over tonight, and you got to perform in the morning.
Yeah.
This is completely out of your routine. You don't know what you're going to talk about, but now you're on a stage. You just got to execute.
Yeah. So here's the thing: we're all different.
Okay.
So for some people, that will be easier than for others.
I can imagine.
And so one of the tools that we have on the Leadership Matters website is called LM Persona. And what that does is it gives leaders, middle leaders, senior leaders, aspirant leaders, you know, anyone in a school actually can do this tool, LM Persona, and they'll find out about their own personality predispositions. So some of us quite like change, some of us quite like lastminute.com and are actually motivated by it. They're the people at uni who would like still be doing their essays in the middle of the night just before. There might be you, Cameron, because I suspect you're someone who likes last minute, not judging you at all. But others like things to be more organised and tidy and planned.
Yeah, of course.
Now, it's not saying you can't do. It's not saying you can't be planned. You know, we've planned this interview ages ago. You're very well organised, but that's actually you writing with your other hand, metaphorically. It's not you being your natural self, which is like just go with the flow.
No, it's true.
That's
why I've got a PA now. Enzo's like my right hand man, so she emails me, and I just. Yeah. I'm a mess sometimes. Yeah. But it's what I do, what I know I'm good at. Is what I
but like I got the email from you yesterday saying just checking we're on for tomorrow, and that wasn't you. That was you, not your PA. So you've learnt to do it. Yeah. So we can all do it, but
you have to, because to begin with, I bet even when you started Leadership Matters, when you started being working for yourself, you got to create your own routine, your own habits, and you got to look after yourself, because if you don't, you're not going to have a business.
And one of the things that really helps people do that who are not naturally organised is the concept of the checklist. So checklists,
Me.
there's a whole topic in the book, checklist, like this, you know, when you're sitting in a flight somewhere and you hear on the intercom, you know, doors to cross-check and manual. Why is that happening? Because a woman or a man in the cockpit has got a clipboard with a piece of paper and a pen, and it just says someone needs to say that, and then they tick it off.
Wow.
So with all that technology in a plane, there's still a pen and a piece of paper and a clipboard and a checklist. It's the way that intelligent, clever people stop forgetting to do the things that can be disastrous if you don't. It doesn't teach you how to fly the plane, but it makes sure that you don't forget to do the things that get forgotten. I mean, the guy that wrote a brilliant book called The Checklist Manifesto, Atal Gawande, he devised a checklist for surgery. Really simple.
Wow.
You know, things like just before we stitch them up, make sure there's nothing still left inside the body. And it as a result of this simple checklist being introduced in hospitals in the developed world, in the developing world, he introduced it in 8 hospitals. They reduced the death rate in surgery by 40% from just using a checklist. So leadership sometimes is just about doing the mundane things really well.
Even though it's interesting you said that, because even though that's simple, we can't confuse that with easy sometimes.
No.
Just because something is simple doesn't necessarily mean it's easy to do.
It's very easy to forget things.
It's simple to wake up in the morning and go to the gym, but it's not easy to do it.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. Yeah. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, completely agree with that. And that's partly about self-motivation, you know, and you probably know more about that than I do. But, you know, believing in what you're doing and wanting to do it for you in the end is the most important thing. But actually, just having simple routines that become habit is what sits behind great leadership. It's not all about being charismatic and inspiring. You know, you have to do the grunt work, and you have to know what the best things are to do as a leader.
We'll talk a little bit more about that, definitely. Because I do have some questions in my head I really want to ask you, but I don't want to miss this slump you've just discussed a minute ago. So 2 years in, everything was going great. Your mum told you to wait till Christmas, see if you change your mind. What happened when January that year? You come back, everything was back to normal, or?
Yeah, I'd had a really good meeting with my boss in the local authority. Like, he was the director of education, and he called me in and was unconditionally supportive of me and what I was doing.
Did he know you were struggling?
Yeah, oh yeah, because he'd seen the preliminary results. Like, he was as gutted as I was. But he could have called me in and said, Andy, this is awful, you know, consider your position. He didn't. He said, let's talk about this, let's work out what went wrong, and let's make sure that you learn from it, which was brilliant.
Do you think that still happens a lot in education?
Not as much as it should sometimes.
Sometimes it feels like being a head teacher is kind of like being a football coach or a football manager.
And they call it football manager syndrome now in education.
Oh, do they actually?
It's a thing.
It kind of sounds like I did that on purpose, but I actually didn't.
No.
But it's true because
I trust
it's
you.
like if you don't perform, it seems like I know some schools and some head teachers. I'm not going to mention them, of course, and these schools need structure. These schools need somebody in there for 3, 4, 5 years, and they're difficult schools. They're not going to change overnight. Yeah. And if you got a year and a half to improve a school, you're gone. It's never going to happen.
Yeah. And some of these schools that you're talking about are not going to change in a year. They take longer than that.
It's culture.
It's culture and climate. I mean, they're my 2 big things that I write about and care about. And you know, and it's very tempting. I mean, when I was managing director at United Learning, I was responsible for 40 schools. And you see
what? Sorry.
I was managing director at United Learning, so it's like the biggest academy group now. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So that was my job. I was like the line manager of all the heads.
Wow, I didn't know you did that.
Okay. So your research has not been quite as good as you thought, is it?
Yeah. A little bit more respect from me.
Okay,
go on, carry on.
Yeah, I know. But it was very tempting sometimes to think they can't do it, and giving people another year or another 2 years to do it was because when I got there, the reputation of the company or the organisation beforehand was, you know, people disappeared in the night, and John Coles and I, who I was working with, we really wanted to change that culture. I mean, obviously, at some point you have to intervene because children deserve, you know.
And there's going to be a lot of pressure and stress in any type of job. But if you're so concerned about getting fired because you're not performing, you're not going to perform really well. No, you're going to be focused on the negative instead of actually the positive.
So true.
So if you know you've got like some time at least. Yeah. Then it does make a difference psychologically. Of course it would. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And the other thing is, Ben Laker, he does a lot of work, Dr. Ben Laker does a lot of work with the National College of Education, one of our partners at Leadership Matters. He did some research with I forget the name of the organisation, the Centre for High Performance or something like that. And what he identified was that for schools that are on that turnaround journey, there are some key indicators that tell you the exam results are coming, which I think is really helpful. They're kind of lead indicators. So, just simple things like parental attendance at parents' evenings, staff attendance, staff turnover. These are proxy measures for changes in culture, changes in climate, that mean that, hang on in there, because these change first. And then other
that's
things
similar to what I do in my PP programs, to be honest. So I measure it through hard data and soft data as well. So I measure mainly attendance, behavior points, lateness, and all of these things, because I know if they're in, for example, some people's attendance could be 67%, say, last year. So when we do the 3 commitments at the end of every single session I do, keeping it simple again, it's nice. Like, okay, actually, do you know what? The hard data is this. Do you think you can turn up tomorrow? Like, I'm already doing it. So it's like, it's trying to tick those boxes again. But then also we do obviously a lot of work around aspirations, goal setting, and things like that.
No, it's the same. It's just the same.
But it's just breaking it down into the simplest form, isn't it?
And 3's a good number. I love 3.
Yeah?
Yeah.
3. I'm a 31 type of man. Don't know why. That's why I used to do it when I played American football. But it's just fascinating, but it's just trying to break it down. But the reason why I do that, I don't know whether it's right, but I talk about breaking obviously the commitments down, goal setting, is because it's direction.
Yeah.
Some of us don't really need motivation. We just need some type of direction.
Yeah.
Where are we going? Because I say it, whether it's right or wrong, is that so many adults spend more time planning a holiday than they do their own lives.
Yes.
And it doesn't take long to plan or just prepare just a little bit more. Yeah. And actually, do you know what? It might make you actually feel a little bit better.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm guessing as well that those goals, the more, you would agree that the more they are created from within the person rather than dictated by you, the more they're going to own it, the more they're going to care about it, the greater chance they're going to do it, which is why I'm such a fan of coaching as an approach, because coaching's all about creating your own intrinsic motivations rather than extrinsically imposing. So I mean, I'm Vivo points and all of that stuff and credits, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, but in the end it's about students wanting to do things because they want to do them for themselves.
Because when we first set the commitments, it's more like be good in school, turn up on time, or this and that. But I start with that because it's a start. Yeah. But then for me, it's about the how. Yeah. How can you achieve that? It's okay to say never get behavior points, but come on, you get 100 every year. Yeah. So it's like, how can we not get as many? Yeah. Because the how's a big question. It's like climbing Mount Everest, isn't it? You might want to climb Mount Everest until you look at the how. Yeah. That might mean you have to spend every single day training, this and that. So the how is the big one. And then what to follow up from that. And it kind of falls into leadership, whether it's self-accountability or it's other people holding us accountable. Yeah. Why is accountability important? Is it important?
Oh, yeah, completely. I mean, children deserve to know that the people that government and the public are spending money on are being held to account for what they do. It's like all things in leadership, though. It's not a yes, we should have it, or no, we shouldn't. It's about getting the balance of it right. My view is we haven't got the balance right. Because we were talking about football manager syndrome. Well, that starts with the system of accountability within the country, which is, got you. And so that then just works. It just all just beautifully filters down the system to the teacher in the classroom. And we, people talk about the fact we've got a recruitment crisis in education at the moment in this country. I don't think we have. I think we've got a retention crisis. Wow. We don't keep our teachers. And the reason we don't keep our teachers is because the environment, the culture and the climate that we're hinting at that they're working in can be toxic sometimes. And so but it all filters down, and the role of the leader is to protect the staff from that sometimes, but that's hard because they're feeling it as well. They know if they don't deliver, so this is where, and even multi-academy trust CEOs, they're feeling that pressure from government, and then they're driving their heads and so it's breaking that cycle.
Can you just walk into a school now and feel whether it's not all about Ofsted, but whether it's a good school or whether it's not, because I can kind of do it now. I don't know it into the detail that you do, but sometimes just by going into the reception, the way the receptionist is, literally everything, it can like sometimes make or break even your experience in the school. So I've gone into school and sometimes receptionist's been kind of rude. So I'm like, what's this school going to be like? And it's funny that most of the time...
Your predictions are right.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think you can. Tony Blair famously said that, didn't he? You know, within 10 seconds of being in a school, he could tell what it was like.
Really?
A bit arrogant, but you know, I think there's a truth in that. And yes, you know, the schools that I was in today, the welcome, the detail, the planning, the organising, I just knew what I was going into.
That's amazing.
And the day was like that. And yeah, there's other places where you rock up and they're not expecting you. There's nowhere for you to park.
Do you need a computer?
You know, all of that. And
that's true.
And I feel sorry as well, because I can see sometimes these are schools that are really struggling.
Yeah.
And it's not even their fault. It's just where they are. But those, you know, they're like the little lead indicators again. Like they're a lead indicator for what you're about to find in the school.
That's true.
Yeah.
So you did your 5 years at this school.
Yes.
How did you recover out of that first slump? 2 to 3 years in.
Well, with all those things I was talking about before, you know, I believed in myself. I did have confidence. I did, you know, I reinvented myself. I said, no, go again. My mum helped. And knowing that they'd got my back in the town hall.
Wow.
That was really important. You know, that they said, no, you can do this. And then the next year we were fine again. But the other thing that wasn't so good is they were then opening up a brand new school, Joe Richardson Community School, won School of the Year last year in the Pearson Teaching School. 9 years after I left, it won School of the Year. It's the thing I'm most proud of I've ever done, because I left something that was in really good shape with the deputy becoming the head, Joe Smith, who's amazing. You know, he's done that headship there longer than I ever did, setting the school up. I did 7 years. I think he's done 9 or something, maybe 10. And when I left the first headship, 18 months after I left, it went into special measures. And I'm not proud of that, because I don't think I left it, particularly the leadership, in a good enough shape. And they also appointed someone who was sadly not with us anymore. She died of cancer, but she came in and she did that thing that classically heads do when they make the mistake, is just come in and change everything without really getting to know and understand how the place ticks. Is it? I think so. I mean, sometimes you have to act fast. If things aren't great, then you have to act fast. But it was a school that actually was it was good. You know, Ofsted had said it was good, and you just need to like take some time to understand what am I dealing with here before you then start to change things. Now, sometimes you can do that quite quickly, but either she wasn't able to do that, or I don't think she had the confidence of the pupils and the staff either, for whatever reason. And so, but that, you know, I have to take my share of responsibility for that. I didn't, you know, when I left,
that says a lot about you to actually take responsibility for that.
Yeah, I mean,
because you could take it as like, you know, I'm such a good leader that it was this, and then it just shows how. But
yeah, I mean, I don't
know.
You
say, do you watch? I'm not a massive football fan, but do you watch football at all?
A bit, yeah.
Like,
I'm
say
like you,
when like what's his name? Alex Ferguson left Manchester United. They took a big slump.
Yeah.
Does that mean he was the best leader or best coach ever, or does that actually, are you actually saying maybe he wasn't because he didn't build up longevity after he left?
So it's hard to know.
It's hard to know, okay.
Yeah, because one situation might not be the same as another.
I got you.
And I think that the leadership that the head provided was a big part of why it went wrong. That wasn't anything to do with me. I wasn't involved in the appointment and, you know, all the rest of it. But
I got you. Yeah.
What I didn't do was succession plan properly. So when I left Joe Richardson, the last 2 years I was working as an executive head. There was a head of school, Jez, who I really was his coach, but he was running it. But you know, he'd been there from the beginning. He understood it. Half of the leadership team that were there when we started the school, there were 4 of us. 2 of them are still there, and they've now got that school that's won School of the Year and the Pearson Teaching Awards.
Wow, that's crazy.
So that's a kind of reverse story, really. And they're incredible what they've done. You know, the results have like gone up a third again from when I left.
When was that?
I left in 2009.
2009.
That's when I was last in a school, working full time in a school.
And then where'd you go?
So that's when I went to work at the National College for School Leadership.
Yeah.
So I was leading on something called London Challenge, which was helping London schools help one another. Leading a program called Good to Great, which is to help more good schools become outstanding, and a lot of other stuff as well. And then when the new government came in 2010, I was responsible for getting into the white paper or helping get into the white paper and set up teaching schools, which you might have come across. So these are like flagship schools that work with other schools to try and improve the system. So I did that for a while. And then I kind of didn't like being a civil servant. And that's when I went to work at United Learning as the managing director there. But that job didn't really suit me. There's something about what you're good at, knowing yourself. And like, what I realised was I was just so far away from the front line, from children, from being a teacher, which when I was ahead, I always taught. Well, that's one of the things I didn't do in that year when I had the problem. And so one of the things I started to do was teach again.
Okay.
I started to say, no, I am going to run the school ski trip again. I might be the head, but I can still do that. Yeah. I am going to get involved in the production side of the school plays because I love that and I'm passionate about it. And I'd stopped doing all those things. So the things that were giving me nourishment, I started doing again. And that was part of how I got myself out of that hole that I was in, because it was doing things with children. And so 5.5 years ago, I decided, no, I want to go back to being a teacher. I mean, this time I mainly work with adults, not children. I do a bit of work with children, but mainly with adults. But I'm doing the thing I'm passionate about, which is helping people learn, grow, develop, teach.
And that's when you've gone on.
And that's when it's just like, and then Leadership Matters has just done that.
Everything you say, it seems like you've got research, you've got the experience, and you've got formulas on formulas to explain everything, which is amazing. What if you just, to somebody who doesn't know much about leadership or know much about it, it could seem overcomplicated at the moment. Yeah. They're completely new to it.
Yes.
What is the first step of becoming a leader?
Okay.
The first step, what is somebody's like, I got to take charge at home, or I got to take charge of my classroom, I got to take charge of my life.
Yeah.
What is like the first step?
So I'm going to give the same answer I gave before.
That's fine.
Because I just think it is simple. And we were talking about 3 being a good number. It's just realizing what your job is. It's about knowing what you want to achieve and being passionate about it. And this is the work of Steve Radcliffe that I'm drawing on here. But it's just 3 things, and it is really simple.
But what if you don't have a vision?
Then you need one. Because if you don't have...
You need one. You have to have a vision.
If you don't have something that gets you out in bed in the morning that you care about, then you just won't really be a very good leader. Because people will immediately sniff out that you're just doing it like for the money or for the power or the status, or whereas when people can see you care about something, you're passionate about it, like you are with your work, like other people are that do your sort of work, like I am with my work, it's infectious, and like stuff just all sort of happens, even when you're not expecting it. Opportunities suddenly present themselves that you've not planned for, but people say, you're lucky. I don't think I'm lucky. I think successful people make their own luck because of their passion for. So be up to something, Steve Radcliffe was saying. He's absolutely right. I mean, by the way, you talking about me having formulas, and I've only really learnt what I really think about leadership in the last 5 years when I've had to properly sit down and think about it.
That's what I mean. So it's like, it's like you know how to do it.
I was doing it, but I didn't really know why.
You don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know why, and I had to. When I went freelance, I thought, well, I'm a geographer. Like, I need a map. I need to see, like, what does it look like? What are all the bits of this and how do they fit together? So I spent a lot of time reading and working that out for myself in a simple way, not overcomplicated, because, if things are too complicated, people just like, it's too much. I just tried to distill it down to the heart of it. And that's why, like, keeping things pithy, practical ideas that help you is so important for me. So that would be my first thing, is like, work out what you care about and what you want to try and achieve. Remember then, it's not about you doing everything. Remember, your job is to get other people to want to lead with you and for you.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's because the temptation is...
What if you are a person who's trying to be in control of everything?
Okay.
Does that make you a leader? Does that make you a bad leader, a good leader? Because some people are just so like... Yes. They don't know how to delegate. They're too scared to delegate, whether it's ego, pride, whether it's scared, insecure.
I'm accountable for this, so I'm not going to let go of it. That's a real... one thing that stops... there are a number of things. I talk about this in the book, the things that stop us delegating. 1, because we think we can do it better. 2, because we think we do it quicker. 3, because we like to keep control. 4, because we want to be needed. 5, because... Yeah, which is a bit deeper, isn't it? But, some people don't get rid of things because they think, this is my identity. This is what I do. I'm not going to give that up. I've seen that. I've done that.
Wow.
Sometimes people will just think they're busy. I'm paid more. I'm accountable. They're all reasons why we don't delegate. And by the way, there are times when not delegating is the right thing to do. You know, if the fire alarm went off now, I wouldn't say to you, should we just sit down and have a little conversation, decide which door to go through? One of us would be up and saying, come on, out, and we'd be doing it, yeah? So sometimes being directive... Yeah, exactly. You'd be leading from the front, Cam, I'm sure. So, you know...
I'll be shutting the doors behind me.
And so, you know, one of the things I write about and talk about with leadership is like thinking, right, what's the situation here? What style of leadership does it need? Does it need me to lead from the front, or does it need me to delegate and empower others? And usually, if things aren't very good or people aren't very experienced, then you need to lead from the front and show people what to do. But that's the habit that you then don't change from. As they get skilled up, they're going to feel like you're micromanaging them. They're going to feel like you don't trust them. They're going to feel like you're not empowering them, giving them autonomy, which is a great motivator.
Of course it is.
And so what you have to do is you have to change the way you're working then to allow them to make more decisions and to feel more empowered and to trust them to do things. Now, if you'd done that at the beginning, you'd have chaos. So it was not the right thing to do at the start. But if all you do is just keep telling people what to do or keep hold of stuff and control, Joel Klein runs the schools, or did run all the schools in New York. He's got this brilliant phrase. I'm paraphrasing it, but he said, you can mandate adequacy. But you have
a bit of an American accent then.
Don't start. But you have to unleash greatness. You have to unleash greatness. Because... great organizations, if you take all the ones from today of Google and Apple and all of these tech companies, they would say, and I kind of believe it, I think, they empower people to own things and make their own choices and decisions. And I think that's, so leadership is about like thinking, making sure you know the situation and then making a conscious decision and asking questions. There's a whole topic in the book about asking questions, because if you ask questions, you find out what you're dealing with. And that can really then help you resist the temptation to jump in and tell people or show people what to do.
So why does leadership matter? Why does it matter? Why?
Because there is so much evidence that says good leadership makes a difference to outcomes. And so I'm passionate about leadership, particularly in schools, because, obviously the most important thing that makes children successful in schools is what their teachers are like. That's, all the evidence says that. But there's a pretty compelling argument that says the second most important thing is what's the leadership in a school like.
Wow.
And, that research was revisited just this year. It was 10 years old, and it was revisited again this year, and it's still saying the same thing.
Wow.
So, the play on the word leadership matters is, one, because it matters, and two, because I care about things to do with leadership, which are leadership matters.
Of course.
And so, that's why we called the book, that's why we called the company Leadership Matters, for that double play on it. But
what would you say now, Andy Buck? What is your dream now? What are you trying to do? Your resume, your CV, whatever you want to call it, is huge. You've done everything in education itself, and now obviously you work for yourself. You provide a huge amount of coaching, training, speaking, books, you name it. What's next? What is the dream for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, you have to think about remembering that work is only a part of life.
Okay.
And I'm 56, which is not ancient, of course.
I mean,
but but I don't want to be the person that just keeps working forever and like starts to deteriorate in health and in effectiveness. So I'm thinking very carefully. So I mentioned before about when I was out of Africa and I had a moment and thought I want to be a teacher. And the next day I signed up at the Institute of Education and was in teaching. Last summer I had a similar thing in a play. And this was a play called Shadowlands, same as the film Shadowlands, probably before your time. But it had Deborah Winger and Anthony Hopkins in it, and it was about the later life of C.S. Lewis, the author who wrote, all the Narnia books and everything. And that he was a confirmed Oxford Don, bachelor, living the life, with sherry after dinner, and he lived with his brother in a house in Oxford, I think it was. And anyway, he fell in love in his 50s with this American woman who was a bit of a fan of his writing, came over, met him, and they fell in love. And they were looking forward to 20 or 30 years of living together. The brother got booted out, all of this. And then she got cancer, and a year later she was dead. And the play is very sad at the end, because it's like, whoa, okay, this was all looking like so exciting, and then that happens. But it's a very moving piece. It's a beautiful play, it's a beautiful film. But in that, I came out of it and I said to my partner at the end of it, we need to go to the pub. I said, because I've just had a moment. So we went to the pub in Chichester, the Bell, where all the lovies go after the show, had a couple of pints, and at the end of it, we'd created what we call Project 2020, which is next year. My partner's retiring, so she's finishing work this year, and we're going to travel. I'm going to work 3 months a year because I can't stop working. I'm going to work 3 months a year. Doing face-to-face stuff in Britain, but it gives windows then to combine travelling with working abroad. So I don't know what's going to happen, but that's the next phase.
But you're still taking a step back from
I was taking a step back, but what I want to do in those 3 months when I'm here is really sing about leadership matters, because what I've learned is, you know, I get emails, I probably get an email a week. It's not a huge number, but I get emails every week from leaders who say, I just wanted to let you know, I think I got my last job because of you. Wow. Or our school's like really been on a journey and you've been a part of that, and I've never even met these people. And that fills me with joy, because one, they can be bothered, they're bothered to want to come and send me that email, which says something. But also it's kind of like I'm multiplying the learning through creating resources that people can use. So that, you know, the 40 videos that talk about how to have a difficult conversation, how to run a good meeting, how to create a vision, how to use the right leadership style, you know, some of the stuff we've been talking about. I've filmed 40 videos, so I don't need to keep saying it because they're there, and they're universal human truths. They probably won't age. I mean, they will eventually age. Obviously, everything ages eventually, but they've got some life in them. They'll keep going after I've long gone, probably. And the books, they're a way of leaving ideas and thoughts that help people organise what they're doing. And the whole idea of the Leadership Matters thing is that it also empowers schools to run their own training so that they can tailor it to suit their own situation. You know, we've got PowerPoint slides, we've got the videos, and then all the diagnostic tools, LM Persona, knowing your personality, but there's a 360 tool on there. And, you know, so what I will carry on doing is creating new tools for that. And, you know, I'm even thinking about doing that for young people as well, you know.
Maybe there's...
Yeah, we could talk about that. Yeah, it's exciting.
So you're just... What it sounds like to me, the next step for you is to work a bit more smarter. Yeah. And have your intentions, your attention on the intention, essentially. So knowing exactly what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve. Yeah. And then cut everything else out and actually enjoy some of the life you've worked for, which isn't a bad thing. Yeah. But as a leader, do you think you will know how to relax to that level?
So I'm quite good at it. I mean, one of the things about being a teacher is you have to make use of those 13 weeks a year that you get. I mean, you have to work in the holidays a bit, but I've always been really strict about that. That's one of the ways. So I am like absolutely full on at work. That's amazing. You know, I'll do a 12, 14-hour day most days when I was ahead. But that wouldn't be healthy if you didn't then like almost completely shut off in the holidays. So we used to go away. I'm never at home in the holidays, 13 weeks a year. I'm lucky enough, you know, I've earned it, but I've got and it was cheap, but I bought this ramshackle place in France. This year I spent 2 months there altogether, and that's where I do my writing and my thinking and my reading. But also it's just like where I switch off. And I worry that some school leaders work too much in the holidays, or teachers too. You know, you need that time to switch off. Those holidays are important.
You have to.
Yeah.
It's about looking after yourself.
Absolutely.
You talked about a resilience tank earlier, but also about the stress tank.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if you're not kind of doing the things you need to do to enjoy yourself, it could even just be looking after yourself, sleeping properly.
Sleep is the biggest thing.
Sleep.
I have to have at least 7 hours a night. Yeah. If I get less than 7, the next night I've got to have 8. Last night I had 8.5. So this morning, they had no chance. Sleep makes amazing difference.
I've got a 5-month-old baby at home, so I'm not so lucky at the moment. But it's true, like, somebody said to me the other day on Instagram, they said, what is like the number one killer of motivation? And I said, being tired. Yeah. Being tired, you're just... It breeds fatigue. Yeah. It's like, especially when you're tired and you're hungry.
Yeah, even worse. Yeah. Well, you just get hangry as well, don't you?
You get hangry, don't you?
Yeah.
But it's just trying to understand what you need to do to ensure that you can stay consistent. You don't have to operate at 100% every single day. Yeah. But if you can still operate, say, from 70 to 90% and look after yourself, that is the main thing. And I talk about it a lot. It's not about perfection. It's about progress.
Absolutely.
As long as we just focus on progress, Progress.
And one of the things that I think, it is about working smarter. I think I've always worked quite smart, and I sometimes used to feel guilty about looking for shortcuts of ways of, making myself more efficient. Actually, I think it's been at the heart of my success. So the thing called the Pareto principle of, works like this. You do this, I suspect. 20% of effort will usually get you 80% of a result.
The 80-20,
Yeah, the 80-20. So, do you want to do one thing perfectly, 100% input, 100% output, or do you want to do 5 lots of 20% and get 5 lots of 80% results? Because 80% normally, when we get 80% in an exam, we're well chuffed. I mean, some things need to be perfect.
What's the first in uni? Like 70 and above.
Exactly. Some things need to be perfect. Like if you were in charge of the budget of United Learning, you can't have that 80% accurate. It's got to be right.
Yeah, I got you.
Some things have to be perfect, but most things don't. And yet, there are lots of little Mr. and Miss Perfects out there in the education world who just think they've got to do everything perfectly, like marking.
That's bad. Yes, you can see it though, can't you? You can see it. You okay? You can see it. So I asked you then.
Yeah.
What's the dream?
Yeah.
What's the reality of the situation?
Okay, not far off that.
Did you see what I done there?
Okay. Is this your podcast? Is it called Dreams to Reality?
Oh, yeah.
My God.
Leadership matters.
Yeah.
No, but what is obviously you say it's not far off that, but what has been the reality of the situation? You don't just build a brand, and let's be honest, right? From my standpoint and why I reached out to you is because you are certified. People I spoke to, head teachers I spoke to, all around the UK. I'm not just based in Bristol. I go everywhere.
Yeah.
People know you, and they actually say you know what you're talking about. Okay. And I think one thing this podcast confirms that.
Right. Okay. That's all right.
But that doesn't happen overnight. That doesn't just come from talking. Mm-hmm. You've built it up. You've led from the front essentially.
Yeah.
But it couldn't have always been that easy, especially by starting your own company and things like that.
No, and people often ask me for advice about, look, I'm thinking of going freelance, I'm thinking of setting up my own company, what's your advice, and so on and so on. And I always say, no, do it, but you need to just think about it. And I didn't do it, there was a lot of, I probably didn't always know I was intuitively doing this, but I was laying the ground for it. So I was building profile. Because it's all about profile in the end, and word of mouth.
That's why I said I've done it for free for 3 or 4
years.
Yes,
exactly. And I was sort of doing that when I was ahead. So when I was ahead, I was doing quite a lot of gigging, speaking at conferences, and then, of course, going and working at the National College for School Leadership. All of that helped build the brand. But, I actually think it goes back to, funny enough, you just mentioned both of these just now in a way, although I don't think you realised you were doing it. But, the 2 elements of trust. If I was the teacher now, I'd test you on whether or not you could remember what they were, Cam. Your face says, "Don't go there, Andy." I know you loved
Friday,
school, didn't you?
Yeah, I know. Left at 5 o'clock this morning.
Character, competence. Do people think you're the real deal? Are you authentic? Okay. And I've just learnt, there's no point in trying to be something you're not. Being you is another thing that makes you a great leader. Don't try and be like some other leader. Just be you. And I really.
Before you say that, does all leaders need to be outgoing?
No.
Outspoken?
Absolutely not.
Is that kind of
It's a misconception.
Yes, because that's what you think. Leaders should be. Come on, let's get out on the field.
Sometimes we're inspired by the quietest of people, aren't we?
True.
I know it's a cliche, but Mother Teresa. She led by her convictions and her quietly getting on and doing amazing things. She wasn't, then you take someone like Nelson Mandela, he gave up all those years of his life in a flipping jail and was
when he's driving through central London today, we seen obviously the Nelson Mandela statue, and I said to Gadget Line Dave, I said, that statue is actually there before he died. I said, that's when you know.
Well, that's serious.
That's when you know.
Yes, yeah.
He said, I'm not going to die until I at least get a statue. And I said, maybe if your mum put one in his garden.
Yeah, now we're into garden gnomes in yours. But anyway, that's another story.
The Buddha in the corner.
Yeah. But, I think, I suppose it comes down to why do people buy into you? And they buy into you because you're good at what you do. That's the other side to it. And because you connect with them in some way, and that's about authenticity and character and intent, and then believing in what you believe in, genuinely. So I think the reason that Leadership Matters has done as well as it has is because I've not tried to falsely claim. I did have a rule that I set myself when I started working freelance. One was, only take jobs where you think you can do it as well as anyone you know, which is a pretty high bar to put on something. But I kind of thought, if I can think of someone who'd be better at this, I'm just not going to do it. I'm just going to recommend them. And people like it when you recommend them, but also it stood me in good stead because it just means you're doing the thing that you're best at.
And you're finding your niche as
and
well.
You're working out what's the bit. So, I never will do... Leadership Matters is not about the technicality. Half of the job of leadership is being expert at doing technical things really, really well. Someone like Tom Rees at Ambition School Leadership, and a guy, I've forgotten his name, he's written a brilliant book, just come out for John Catt. I wish I could remember the name of it. I'll tweet that. That is all about the expert and the technical knowledge you need to have as a leader. And that's really, really important. And people who are in schools or who are really on it, how do you do good performance management? What does really great teaching and learning look like? And how do you help teachers be better at being great teachers? Well, I don't really do much training on that. Because it's 10 years since I've been in a school. What I am really good at, though, and what I'm better at, and know much more about than I ever did when I was in school, is like what are the models of leadership, though? What are the behaviours that people have? And that's the thing that's my niche point.
But you're very modest as well, though. If I said it to you before we started.
Yeah.
I said I was actually taken back by how quite humbling you are, like how modest you are. You're just a people person. And as you said, before we even had any of the cameras on, you just said, I'm just myself.
Yeah.
And that's very apparent. You're not different to how you are now to how the cameras are on. You're the same.
Yeah.
And it's to say, do you know what? I might not be best for this job, so I'm going to say, maybe put this person forward. I think it's very wise. And I think when I first started speaking, I wanted to go everywhere. I want to do sports teams. I want to do corporates and stuff like that. We've done some corporates like Virgin Media and stuff, but we're not focused there because I'm not necessarily ready for it.
Yes.
It's not where I'm at.
And
maybe when in 5 years from now, I might be able to cross over.
Yeah.
One, it's not really my passion at the moment, and two, it's not where I'm at. I'm comfortable where I'm at, and I'm learning and I'm growing every day, and I feel like this is what my focus is.
But I think that's amazing because I think that's just what you need to do. I just absolutely. But we're back to, aren't we? What are you up to? What do you care about? What's your passion? I've done a bit of work in the business world, partly because I was just like curious as to whether or not I could. And whether or not
all these things,
it was fine. They seemed to like it. Yeah. But it didn't give me the same amount of feedback and pleasure. And so if those things come along, then great.
You can take it, aren't you? Of course.
And like, I'm trying to plough some of the money that I get from that into like a charity. That's the other thing I'm thinking of. Well, I am doing. I'm setting up a charity to help people aged between 16 and 18 who are like really talented in the performing arts. It's called the Started Foundation. And David Putnam's just agreed to be our patron, which I'm very excited about.
Is there a website for this?
Yeah, there is.
So we can put all the
It exists. It exists. But it's not up and running yet. So it's just like a...
Once again, if there's anything I can do to help, any other opportunities...
Okay, fantastic.
Obviously, I'm connected to a wide range of different people, especially within that age group.
Yeah.
So even if I don't know them directly...
But there are people who are aged 16 to 18 who are very talented, who could go to the Brit School or whatever the equivalent is in Bristol or BOA in Birmingham or wherever it is, who don't because they don't know how to audition well, or they're worried about how am I going to pay the bus to get there every day. So we're just going to give training for auditions and bursaries, and that's what it will do. And I won't do any of that. I'm just going to like put my own money in to start with from particularly some of these business gigs, and a little bit back from Leadership Matters into that, and that's then amazing. Prove the concept, and then I'll knock on the door of some. So if you know anyone in business who's like got a few quid that they want to do something good with, that's the plan.
I heard this guy Andy Buck's got quite a lot of money. I'm considering knocking on his door soon.
That's the first time I've shifted uncomfortably in my chair. Did you notice that?
You ever thought about running for Prime Minister?
Oh, too many skeletons in the cupboard apart from anything else. I don't think I'd stand scrutiny for 5 minutes. Yeah. Thanks. You just went straight in there, didn't you? I mean, I also think...
When you watch, though, like Donald Trump, watch all these people, regardless of what they're saying, I bet you're fascinated with the way they lead. I bet you're just watching the way they talk, the words they use, how...
Do you know the thing I could not stop watching was every year the president, I don't know if this still happens actually under the current president, but the president of the United States every year has a dinner with the press corps.
With a comedian? Oh,
No,
everyone? Oh.
well, I don't know. I think they may have a comedian, but
Okay.
they have a dinner for the White House press corps, and it's a big affair. It's glitzy. They're all in tuxedos and all the rest of it.
I think it's the same event.
It might well be, and then but the president does a kind of speech at that. And I watched Barack Obama do his final one. It's the one where he does the mic drop.
Yeah.
Well, I watched the whole thing. It's over an hour.
Wow.
Couldn't stop watching it. And I was like learning. And Steve Radcliffe, I've watched him talk. You know, I'm always watching people and learning. How do they? I mean, you must be the same because you know we're in a similar business, just different audience.
I can't stand still when I talk. I can't stand still anyway. So when I see someone like Barack Obama up there, just I just think, wow.
So I move about, but I move about less than I did because when I watched myself back on video, or I watch other people who move about a lot, and stand-up comedians sometimes move about too much. It's a nervous energy. It's a bit off-putting. Like it doesn't make it as easy to watch. So it's little things like that. The open body language.
I think I'm more like that in schools if I've got a 300, 400 person assembly. Yeah. So I'm up, I'm to the right, I'm to the left because I'm to the side. Yeah. So I'm just trying to grip their attention.
And do you do what I think is called crossing the line?
What's that?
So it's like when you walk down the aisle and you're looking at the screen or a resource, standing with them, looking forwards.
Sometimes.
Because again,
I don't normally.
Yeah. So I've started to do that a bit. It's quite interesting. It's called crossing the line, where you go into the audience.
So I go into the audience, but I don't really turn my back on it.
Okay. So I'm sort of looking with them at something. So if I'm explaining a model, I'll sometimes talk about it while we're all watching it.
One thing I've started to do in a workshop though is what's it called? Set up the tables like a big N.
So I call that a horseshoe.
Yeah, horseshoe essentially.
That's at Joe Richardson. The classrooms are designed big enough where you could have a horseshoe if you wanted one.
Are they good? Are they good practice?
It's good practice.
I quite like it because
everyone's on the front row.
Everyone's on the front row, and I've kind of got that space to use.
And they can see and hear each other. Plus, you've got a space in the middle.
They haven't got their back to you, and
everyone's on the front row.
Everybody's
I love a horseshoe. And then you can get them having pair conversation, or you can get them to shift around and make a little group of 4 and then put the chairs back.
We did it the other day in a school in Aylesbury, and we had 60 year 9 students in this two classrooms put together. Yeah. It was hard work. It was probably the biggest horseshoe I've ever done, but it was good.
Love a horseshoe. It
was good. So to wrap this up, I ask all my guests this type of question. Okay. If you could sit down with any 3 people, dead or alive,
cool,
who would it be? You've already mentioned if people like Nelson Mandela might not be those people, but who would you sit down with?
So I'd want someone who I think would just be really entertaining and fun. And so there are a few people that are coming to mind, but someone who I think would just be lovely and who's a big gay icon as well would be Stephen Fry. Okay. I just think Stephen Fry would be amazing to sit down and have dinner with and talk about stuff. So him. Gosh.
On the spot.
Yeah, no, you are, because it's like it just says something about you, doesn't it, as well? So.
Yeah, we're going to judge you off this whole, what you're about to say now.
Yeah.
The whole interview is coming down to this question.
So I kind of am fascinated by Olivia Colman.
Who's that?
So she's an actress. She's currently playing the Queen in The Crown.
Oh, okay.
But she also played the head of MI5 in the really dark thing called The Hostage, I think it was. The Bodyguard. TV series. I don't know. She's like a woman for the moment for me. I'm just like watching it. I just find her absolutely fascinating. And then probably Cameron McIntosh.
That's a great
I'd love to sit down to Cameron. Yeah, anyone with Cameron, you've got to ask yourself the question. To be honest, haven't you? By the way, I don't think he's ever called Cam, but he probably is actually. But I just don't know him that well. I have met him a couple of times, but not to talk to. So he is a theatrical entrepreneur. He's behind Les Miserables. Sunset Boulevard, all these, and he's collaborated with people like Andrew Lloyd Webber, but he's a big theatrical impresario, and like he's kind of like got the other job I would love to have. I'd love to have been an architect. I'd love to have been a theatrical impresario, like just behind the scenes, thinking about what the people like, and I just love all that, and I think he would be very interesting. What he's like as a person, I'm not so sure compared with the other two. I think the other two would be lovely. I think he has a rep where he can be a bit tough sometimes, and I don't know. Yeah, but I don't know the man behind the So they weren't the things you were expecting. You know, might have said Nelson Mandela or
do you know
Barack
what?
Obama.
That's the
or
first time anyone's ever said three whole people I've not
never heard of.
never heard of. So I'm working
great.
on my listeners because
Okay.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the respect line has gone up or down.
I don't
as
know if they
a
picked
result
it
of
up on
that.
the camera.
Yeah,
or not.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Who are they?
Anyone?
Yeah.
What advice would I look up to you? Before I go, I got asked this. What advice would you give to me? You know what I'm thinking. You kind of know what I'm trying to do in a way. What advice? I'm 27, 28 on December the 3rd. I will be accepting birthday cards if you want to send one.
Okay. September the 3rd.
December the 3rd.
Oh, okay, right.
But what advice would you give me? Obviously, I've taken on some people now. I'm starting to train other people. So I'm building and I'm scaling. Obviously, I don't want to lose the value we're adding. But what advice would you give me or what I'm trying to do? Considering I'm heavily pupil premium focused and...
Yeah, so I think meeting you and like hearing you talk about what you're doing, number one, just don't lose your passion for what you do.
Okay.
Just don't lose that. And I really like what you've said about how, like, to start with, I'd take any job, but like really, really honing that in onto where am I adding the most value. So I really like what you said when I'm working with fewer pupils now than I was before. The English teacher me would say fewer, not less pupils than you were working with before. Yeah. Can't help myself. And really like making a bigger difference. Making a bigger difference. So, you know, that idea of seeing a group of students 6 times a year rather than one. So doing stuff for the longer term, because in the end that will make more of a difference. And in the end, when you're freelance, when you're in any role, whether it's a business and education or anything else, I kind of think it comes down to, does it work? Do I work? Does what we're doing? And the fact that you're getting bigger and realizing I need others to help me, then that's great, because then you're going to have a bigger sphere. But keeping what you care about at the core of what you do, number one. Number two, and again I think you do this, just be you. Be authentic. Don't try and be something you're not, which you don't. I love that.
Because I had a choice today. We've got clothes in the car. Thinking, do I do my hair for this one?
Put on
some trousers?
There's me in a suit and tie.
But it was literally a consideration. We was like, do we do it? And then I thought, no, I'm not. I'm not going to. Because
keep doing it.
That's not who I am.
Because
I'm not always going to have my hat done to the back when I'm a bit older. But sometimes it's just like, we've been traveling a lot today. So it's like, no, I'm just going to be me. I think.
And I love, the fact that you also, like, you're investing in people, but you're also investing in, coming here with all this, I mean, it's quite fancy equipment. I have to tell you guys that are watching this, like, that's not cheap. So, keep taking the little risks, but calculated risks. Keep pushing the boundaries. But don't go too far in front of yourself. Because then people fall over. The hubris takes over and they start to believe their own, drinking your own bathwater, I think is the phrase.
I think that happened to me though, and I think I've already a couple of years ago when I said I was just doing assemblies, and it was great. It was good for the ego. I was getting messages on Instagram after constantly, "You're amazing," and I think I really kind of. I bought into that, but then I've quickly realised, and we've realised that all of that stuff really it's nice, but it doesn't matter, and that's it's nice, but that's why I redefined what we're trying to do, and I've cut it down. I'm not going for the big numbers. I'm not going to look successful on Instagram or social media. I'm actually trying to make a difference, and I know what we're trying to do. So it kind of felt like a step back, but we're actually not.
No. I think that's wise beyond your years, because it took me a lot longer to realise that. I really think that's true. So I don't know. I'm just trying to sum up what I said. So keep caring about what you care about. Keep authentic, and keep pushing the boundaries. But like 10 to 15% outside. Don't go 50.
It's true. Anyway, Andy, thank you.
That's been fun.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
I can't believe it. Like, we've been going an hour probably.
I don't know how long we've been doing. Just over an hour. Honestly, thank you, and hopefully, as I said, if there's anything I can do, I'm sure I'll be bugging you on LinkedIn and stuff, sending you messages and stuff like that. Anyway, but I do appreciate your time, especially now on a Friday evening. But yeah, thank you.
Been a
We
pleasure.
will put all your information, everything in below. You've also
Cool.
got an event coming up, right, for teachers and stuff? Is that right?
Yeah, so we've got an annual conference in Birmingham on the 24th, I think. But if you just Google LM Meet or Leadership Matters, you'll see links to
And
it.
as Andy said, guys, there's a huge amount of stuff, tools, content, and things online what you can check out, and even just follow Andy on Twitter and stuff like that. You won't only just see him drinking wine, you will see him.
Did you see that today?
You will actually see some valuable content on there. But yeah, once again, guys, that's another podcast wrapping up here in London. We got probably a 3.5 hour drive back to Bristol, but it's all worth it. Make sure you comment, you share, you like, and hit that big red button, subscribe. And remember, you can either have excuses or you can have results, but you cannot have both. I'm out. Peace.
Monday.